Emily, if we can come to you on this, because, of course, you are part of that generation that Nicola Sturgeon is squarely pointing the finger at and saying how worried she is, and the pictures of the young people not socially distancing makes her want to cry. What's your reaction to what she had to say?
Well, Ben, do you know what makes me want to cry? The job opportunities that young people aren't going to be able to get because of COVID. I think young people really have the bad end of the deal here. I mean, a lot of grads now can't get jobs and are having to fork out for masters. And I think young people are in a really difficult position. And at the end of the day, only 2% of COVID deaths came from people under the age of 50. And a lot of those deaths were people who had underlying health conditions.
So less at risk, youngsters are aware of that, and obviously going to face a very tough time and have had a very tough time in lockdown, we know that. But does it mean, though, that they should flout the rules on social distancing? That's the problem, isn't it? Because then the entire community is at risk, because they may not be at risk of dying so much as others, but they are posing a risk of passing it on.
Well, some of these young people are students who may live with other students, and obviously they are not in households with vulnerable people. But I think it does come down to personal responsibility. For example, if a young person knows that they live with someone vulnerable, then that is something that they have to consider. But at the end of the day, we are at a point now where people under the age of 40 are more likely to die in a car crash. Are we going to say that people under the age of 40 now can't go out and drive?
Well, we want to avoid that too, don't we? That's the truth of it all. What do you think about this, Sarah? You volunteered your own views on it on Twitter, didn't you? And
yes, foolishly.
Sorry?
Foolishly.
Well, you say foolishly. There was a reaction, wasn't there, to what you said? Talk us through that.
I mean, I think it's about it. I don't think it's really about age. I think it's about health. And I think that, but I mean, you know, my view is that I think I agree with Emily, and I think their generation is suffering actually quite a lot from this, because, as she says, you know, they are the ones who are going to have to an extent, you know, live with the consequences. The balance is we need to try and find a balance between protecting people's health and protecting the future of the country, and that is incredibly difficult to do. My view is that I'm 53. 50-year-olds are sort of the financial backbone of the country, and also the social backbone. We look after the children and we look after our parents, and if we have to sort of stop, I think it's going to be very difficult for everyone, not just for us. And I think really...
But Sarah, if they're the financial backbone and the social backbone, shouldn't they be protected? Shouldn't the younger people, shouldn't Emily and her sort of friends and peers, shouldn't they be taking that a bit more seriously? Because if we want to get to the point where they can get back to work and the graduates can get their jobs, we need to combat the virus.
Yes, but as Emily says, the risk is relatively low. I think it's about health, and I think that the truth is there are lots of 70-year-olds who are incredibly fit, and lots of 70-year-olds who are not very fit, and the same is true across the age group. Now, the thing is, for me, my mother, for example, had it. She was 73. She was very ill for a week, but she's a very healthy person. She managed to recover very successfully. It is a very odd virus. It seems to... You know, we still really don't understand how it affects people. And I think age is perhaps not quite the right marker to use. And I think it should be more about individual health. We all have GPs. Our doctors all know whether we're in good shape or not. I think that is something that we should think about doing, trying to find a way of individuals establishing whether they have personal risks that they need to worry about, and then taking action. You know, rather than just saying you're this age, we're putting you in that group and you need to do this. Because I think that is very difficult. As to the under 30s, I feel for them a little bit, actually, I have to say. And you know, I agree. They should. I think, but by and large, they are being quite careful. I mean, I do think we see these images of people, you know, congregating, but I think it's a minority. Most 30-year-olds and below, I know, are actually behaving in a responsible way.
Let's go to Errol, because Errol, when this all started, the rhetoric from the government certainly was, we're all in this together. Now, of course, that tone has changed over the last few months as things have developed. And actually, what Sarah's suggesting doesn't seem ridiculous, does it? Why not have a more bespoke system whereby you are assessed on your individual needs rather than a big blanket ban on where everybody should go, just purely because that's the easiest way of dealing with things?
Yeah, but you have to think of it this way, because I'm an employer. I'm over 50. I think I'm quite responsible. But at the same time, it does kind of shock me how many people just flaunt and just go out and they don't social distance. But every single day, I think it's important for people to understand at this stage to single out, people over 50, I think is ridiculous anyway. Because I'm that person on the end of the phone and saying to somebody who is younger than me or working for me, why aren't you at work? The main thing is to kind of get out there and work. But at the same time, I think it's very unjust to segregate people of that age.
Sarah, just to read out your tweet, if you can bear it, one of the things I think people reacted to was this. You said, we all have to die sooner or later. If I get COVID and cop it, so be it. My time has come. I've had a good life, better than most in this world at any rate. I certainly don't expect the entire nation to bankrupt itself to save me. Phrased it slightly differently, but you know what I mean. And I suppose that sense that a lot of people have, that we maybe have to have as we try to balance kind of getting on with our lives, getting on with our livelihoods and protecting lives around us, it is that sort of attitude of, oh, well, I go for it, is about someone that hasn't directly seen the effects of it. And I think that's what people worry about youngsters, because they're less at risk, because maybe they haven't come into contact with it. They are thinking, oh, I just need to get out and have some fun and be young, and maybe not seeing the risk.
I mean, that tweet, what I was trying to say was that I personally feel that I have a duty to carry on working in order to go back to work. Monday was go back to work day. I feel I need to do that because, I have a responsibility to the next generation. That's how I feel personally. As it happened, I was very, very ill with swine flu, which was the last pandemic. And, so I do have some experience of it. And the truth is that what I think is that you can't eliminate risk completely. I would never put anyone else in danger. I wear my mask, I do my social distancing, I do all of that stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, me personally, I feel that it is just one of those things. I've just got to get on with doing the things that I do, looking after my children, looking after my parents, going to work, paying my taxes, contributing to the economy to keep things moving. I have no desire to catch COVID and be incredibly ill with it. But I've done all the things that I can do to protect myself. I've lost a lot of weight recently. Being healthy, doing all the things, which is what we all need to do. We all need to try and take a bit of responsibility, do our very best as individuals to protect ourselves, to protect the NHS, to make sure that we, are in the best possible position individually, physically, health-wise, to combat this thing. We need to find a way of living with this very unpleasant threat that we have.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately, it's not a good, I would like to say that wasn't the case, but it is the case. That is the harsh reality of this.
Okay.
That's all.
Emily, we're getting lots of messages from our viewers this morning, not particularly sympathetic to your cause. I have to say, Kerry says, I'm sick of hearing these youngsters moan about lockdown. Try thinking about the elderly in care homes who have passed away without their families with them and haven't been able to see any members of their family. Stop being selfish, follow the rules. It's really not that difficult to social distance or to wear a mask. What do you say to people like Kerry?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say it's a bit of an assumption that young people haven't had experiences with COVID. I personally volunteered on a COVID ward, so I got to see it firsthand. And I think one of the biggest problems is...
Emily, by seeing that, so that, I mean, it's fantastic and good
Wonderful.
for you for doing that. I mean, it's brilliant that you did that. Did that change your approach to how you're behaving since having had that experience? Do you think that you are maybe more responsible than some of your friends because you have seen firsthand how debilitating it is?
Well, I think it's a balance balance. I think obviously try and social distance as much as you can and stick to the rules. But I think it is important to also invest back into the economy so we can keep funding the NHS. And I think this 50% off that Rishi Sunak has offered is a really great opportunity for young people who may see meals out as a luxury to do their bit in investing in the economy. And I think it is time for youngsters to get back out there and have some fun. Thanks, Rishi.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of feeling in all ages about doing that, isn't there? What about some of the irresponsible gatherings we've seen? Like in London, there were some 500 illegal raves, which isn't, people can't really social distance at those events. They certainly weren't, reportedly, from the police social distancing. Do you think that's the problem, that sort of, you know, youngsters go out, take it carefully initially, and then the feeling of just being free takes over?
But I think that's one of the kind of side effects to having a lockdown. People do feel frustrated, they feel cooped up, and you know, it does have an effect on everyone's mental health. And throughout the lockdown time, people were just getting more and more frustrated, and that's what it resulted in. And of course, I do not condone that, and it is completely wrong, and there are other ways to deal with it. And it's a really great move to see the gyms have been back open so people can let off some steam, for example. And I think it is a small minority that are kind of letting the cause down, and of course the media are going to focus on that minority.
Amir Khan is our doctor this week, and he's been sitting listening to that. I mean, you're hearing some various opinions there, Amir, but how do you feel when you hear what Emily was just saying there about, you know, she's had frontline experience. She went and volunteered on a COVID ward, and yet she's still celebrating the fact that Rishi Sunak is allowing people to go out and get stuck into socialising and entertaining. And
yeah, I think it's great that she's volunteered on a COVID ward. I've had a lot of first-hand experience. I've had conversations with husbands, wives, daughters, sons when their relatives have died in care homes. And I can't tell you how awful that is. I've had to do it over the phone rather than in person, which makes it twice as hard, really difficult for me, but so much harder for them. And when you've had those conversations, when you've spoken to relatives, when you've seen the devastation it can cause in people's lives, you wouldn't be behaving like this. You know, we all have a responsibility. It's difficult to point the finger at under 30s. I don't think that's fair. We all have a responsibility. But to say, well, we've had enough, we need to go out and socialise, if you've seen what I've seen, you just wouldn't be doing that at all.
One last message here, Errol, that you maybe could respond. Kez, and this is really important as well for a lot of our younger viewers, and Emily and her friends. Kez is saying, please don't tar all the youngsters being reckless and breaking the rules. I have 3 under-22s in my household. They haven't once gone out without masks or broken any rules. The vast majority of young people are doing their best, aren't they? They are desperately trying to adhere to what they're being told to do. However, when you see the fact that there were 500 illegal raves in London, Avon and Somerset Council couldn't break up a 3,000-person rave that happened down on an old RAF field. There are young people gathering. They weren't just young people there, of course. There are still too many people, it feels like, taking too many risks. Yeah,
and I think the risks are so awful because they don't think about going home because, yes, I've got 3 kids and they've been sticking by the rules. I've got 47 team, as in people who work for me, they're sticking by the rules. I've got A team and I've got B team, and I try to say to them, you can't hug, you can't say hello in that way, social distance. And I think the main thing is that everybody has to adhere by the rules and make sure we're not going to spread this virus. But I think it's really important to say that absolutely at the moment for people to start talking about age, as in 50 and 30, now 4 months on, is just a little bit ridiculous.